Hello.
Hi, Robert.
You should hear me well. Cool.
Hey, Chris. Hi, Rasmus.
Hello. Paulo, for the agenda, did we still want to do a walkthrough of the integration test ideas that we, or at least the idea that New Relic was using?
I think we should do that too.
Okay.
I think the issue that you found we probably are not gonna solve
Probably
here.
not.
But I think we should discuss and bounce ideas about that, about the issue that found besides the app, you know.
Yeah.
So let's give one more minute. You usually start a bit late, so
Yeah, and if Raj was able to join, I wonder if he would have ideas.
he just pinged me saying that he is not gonna join.
Okay, yeah.
But he was looking also into that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Zach is here now. Hi, Zach.
Hey.
I think we should start then, and let's start with the thing that Chris found. Basically, they change a package, a NuGet package, remove a reference to one of the abstract packages of ASP.NET Core, and now we fail to load when we try to put that instrumentation. I think Chris and I tried the kind of simple stuff, and at least for me, nothing worked. I have to confess, I had a silly idea that I think may work, about generating a NuGet package in the same format as the old one, including, but I think that's kind of very, very forced workaround. You know, I didn't try, but it should work. The previous package was working. So if we just wrap the package correctly, it should work. But it's interesting that this way that the dependencies are framework dependencies are handled, for me, is kind of a little bit opaque. You know, okay, they are supposed to come on the framework, but if you have application, you have to add a specific item group on the project to kind of load those reference. So I was reading some of the links that you put there, Chris, and there is one thing that's like, oh, okay, if you have a SDK app that you are building and you wanna that reference, you add a framework reference to your project. And your project basically build with a different depth JSON, but other than that, is the same kind of result, I think.
Yeah, and then it looks like there's also another difference in way. I don't know that compiler's the right term to use here, but those framework references are treated very differently than package references in that if you do not have a direct usage of something in that assembly in your project, then it will not include that framework reference or a reference to that assembly in your output.
That's I didn't test that, but I was suspecting that was the case. So I think there is some if I remember the expression for this thing in compiler is tree shaking. Um, I think there is some tree shaking going on there, and kind of, oh, hey, we're not using, and remove it.
Right.
So then we don't get the thing. So and NuGet package doesn't behave that way at all, you know.
Right.
So it's very, very likely that this is exactly what's going on. And I'm open to ideas about how we can work around this, you know.
Yes. So I'm continuing to poke at different things. That's kind of where I'm at. Just poking, but almost flailing.
Yeah, I'm at the same. I probably test only basic, even basic stuff than what you are trying, but yeah, that's what I tried. Some combinations of that, and I think perhaps the best way will be to understand how those framework dependencies are really handled by the build and the runtime. You know, that will be the best path, but uh, that I think we need help from Raj or somebody that has the contacts to. We can certainly dig out of that, but probably it's gonna take us much longer than if somebody has the information. You know?
Yep.
Yeah,
I would
seems.
add.
Yeah.
I'll just quickly say. So I know that in our Datadog one, we still reference the abstractions in our own project. So we still get the sum reference even though we don't actually ship the binaries. That could be a fine workaround in the meantime, and if until you want to try and solve this like for real, it's still working for us. And
Which
really see any issues.
abstractions one?
It is. Let's see. I think we actually just pull in. Okay, because we also do MVC, so we pull in the MVC abstractions, which then I think also in turn pulls in the HTTP abstractions.
Okay. So maybe that'll be the workaround.
Yeah. And so that hasn't crashed for us, so it should work for now.
Yeah, that's worth trying out.
Yeah, and I think that touches on the thing that Chris was saying is the way that NuGet package reference is treated different than framework reference. Yeah. So the framework reference seems to go to the tree shaking, and if we don't have a actual live call for the thing, the module is just not there. It's not loaded at all. So. Yeah, so I think what you said, Zach, makes sense, and perhaps is the way to go. I was just wondering if the fact, because I tried some stuff adding a reference to just the abstractions, in principle should be the same thing as bringing the MVC, but I keep wondering if that makes something extra to be different, you know, kind of bring something extra that is needed, and in the first case, it's not there. But this is definitely something that we should try. Chris and I, in our blind trials, we should try that.
Yeah, and then another thing we can do is just duck type all the ASP.NET Core types. So that way we don't really care about the abstraction assembly or anything like that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
To do that, we'd have to upstream that into the SDK project.
Oh, so we're talking about not just solving it here, but also in the SDK?
So right now we're loading the instrumentation from the SDK.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Okay.
And so that's kind of what we're running into.
I see.
So I mean, technically, we could just write our own instrumentation and use duck typing to handle all of that. But at this point, we're trying to leverage the SDK for consistency.
Yeah, and related to that idea that I mentioned of wrapping a package that wraps the reference, we could wrap the original ASP.NET Core SDK instrumentation that we have on the SDK repo, and do extra stuff if it's needed to avoid tree shake and things like this. We can do that. It's not pretty, but in theory it should work.
Yeah.
Until we test, nothing's guaranteed, but at least in principle it should work. As I mentioned, Raj said that he's gonna also look into that. I really hope that because at least for my part, and I didn't find a very deep explanation about framework loading, that framework reference. I just find, hey, if it's this case, use this, but I didn't understand exactly how it works, how it's different, so perhaps with that extra information we can get to kind of a better perspective on exactly what's happening. Rasmus, you are gonna say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's probably the tips JSON that's the key for both of our issues.
But for the MongoDB thing, if we add the reference directly in the application for what's needed, it fixes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So because that works as NuGet package resolution, so the thing works as we needed. But when the reference is this framework reference, we didn't find a way to make it work. So
even the depth JSON is not loading the right version from the or.
I just tested the ASP.NET Core. I didn't when that was failing, I keep testing that. I didn't try to test what comes after. I was kind of stuck on that, trying to fix that. So I didn't look to what comes after. I don't know if anybody else did that. Yeah, so I think Chris and I were on the same kind of, hey, we have this problem here and we stuck on that one. We didn't try to look further.
Yeah, I think that depth JSON should work with both NuGet and framework references.
Should. I know that when I looked at the depth JSON file, I didn't actually see any reference in there for whatever reason.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think perhaps I need better control on that. But when I tried some different builds, I remember that I got, when I include the framework reference, I get a depth JSON that has many more things. But I don't recall from the top of my mind if had the explicit reference that we are missing. So yeah, we can look into that. But it does change the depth JSON, but I actually don't understand exactly if just add all the reference, if does add the reference, does a tree shake, and then oh, this is the set that you need or something like that. I really don't know.
Yeah, and the reality is, so the test app that we're testing with is an SDK web app. And so already includes the framework reference out of the box. We don't have to explicitly add that to the project file.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, by the
But-
way, I tried that on a console app just to see what comes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually also doing the application with direct references and then compiling the text.json so I can compare if something is missing from the application I'm trying to instrument or yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I think for now we have a few ideas to try.
Yep.
So for now is what we can do. And if we learn more, let's share and figure it out.
Sorry, but I was a minute late. Are you talking specifically about single file applications?
No. So we're running into a dependency issue. Let me see if I can.
The tree shaking is what is confusing. You shouldn't see tree shaking if without single file, I thought.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's the right term to describe what we're running into. So I'm gonna just send a link.
Do you
Zoom
want to
chat.
share? I think, Chris, perhaps you can share and explain to Dave. Dave may have some.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so let me share my screen. I've got some stuff up. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm just running our proof of concept application. And when I run the app, as it's trying to load the ASP.NET Core instrumentation, we are running into this file not found exception when trying to load, here it is, Microsoft ASP.NET Core HTTP abstractions. And it's a particular version that is trying to load. And so this version is coming from the framework reference used by the instrumentation assembly. So it's just referencing the ASP.NET Core framework reference. And so I've been trying a few things to get it to load. And so I've tried directly referencing the NuGet package. I've tried explicitly referencing that assembly. And I was just never able to get it to load.
Yeah, I think it will be helpful to show what changed on the package that we use.
Yeah. So if I pull that back up, so let's see. So this is the pull request that changed. And the specific item of interest is here, where the instrumentation library itself depended on the NuGet package for this, for that abstractions
So
library.
when you guys are talking about tree shaking, you mean the package reference is removed at some point?
No, so when a package reference is used as a dependency for something, then we're able to add that package reference to the sample application to ensure that the correct version of a dependency is going to get loaded by the application. But what we're running into is when it's not a package reference and you're relying on a framework reference, like I have highlighted here, then we haven't figured out a way to add something to the sample applications project file to get the right version of a dependency loaded.
Yeah.
And the tree shaking mention came when we are saying that when we have a package reference, even if you don't actually reference the code, at least when you build and publish the whatever you imported on the package is there. But with the framework reference, I think Chris did some experiment that if he was not referenced, he didn't notice any difference. That's right, Chris?
I found a reference to it in Stack Overflow where people were trying to do something similar, where they had to explicitly use something from that assembly in their code in order for that dependency to ultimately get published with their application.
So this is not an area that I'm expert in, unfortunately. But if you, the easiest way, like I can find the right people at Microsoft. The easiest way is if you send me an email. That's how we operate still. It's not
Okay.
an email. And if you write up the problem and send an email to me, then I can forward it to the right people and hopefully we can get somebody to weigh in.
Yeah, and Raj said that he was also taking a look at this too, so that'll help as well.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Okay, I was gonna say, Chris, for you to continue
Oh
sharing.
yeah, sure. Sure. Are we going to the next topic or?
Unless anyone wants to bring anything else to add to our framework reference panes, we can.
Okay, I'll share my screen again. Okay, so let me know if you're able. No, that's not what I want. Where is it? Okay, are you able to see my Windows VM now? I'm not sure if it's showing my Windows desktop. You should see Visual Studio open.
Yes, we see.
Okay, thank you. So last week we talked about integration test strategies. And so I have New Relic's integration test code up to just kind of give a walkthrough of how New Relic is solving some of the problems, which we may find useful or we may not. And so just to start things out, I'll probably show what we were originally doing with the integration tests. So I'll just choose one of the simpler cases where, so we have a test fixture, and in here, we kind of abstract away how we start a process up that will then run a test application. So that's handled in this remote service fixtures that we include. And so what happens there is it will, oh gosh. Going into here. So we abstract away what we need to basically bootstrap the running application. Bear with me, it's been a while since I've looked at this. Yeah, so we have this setup step where you can set up things like environment variables or any other thing that you need to set up for the running process. And then we have the sequence of commands that you want to give to the running application. So you can just define those as methods within each test. And so let's see what other things are interesting here. Okay. So here, what we do is we we end up copying. So there's a publish step for the application so that it builds all of the binaries for the test app. And then we copy those binaries to some temporary location, as well as the binaries from the agent or tracer, depending on which terminology you want to use, to a local folder next to the application that the test application that we want instrumented. And then of course it sets the environment variables appropriately to use that folder. And then it will start off the process. So this remote application start will start the process. The environment variables are in place so that it'll be instrumented. We exercise the application, and then we shut it down. But the way that we exercise the application
This code is all in the constructor in the fixture.
Yeah, it's done in the yeah, a lot of it's done in the constructor, and then it just ensures that it only runs once. I'm not aware of the history for that, but that's just how it was decided to be done, so that the process just gets started when the constructor runs, and then when any of the facts get run, it's not going to kick off another process. And some of the things are cached to prevent rerunning it. But I don't remember the details. I think that's kind of the less interesting part of it. And so the more interesting part will be the way the actions are managed. So I guess this one's less interesting in that it's only defining some setup. So let me find this. Oh. Okay. Anyways, usually what happens is in here, there's another method that we pass in that defines the actions to execute. And in those actions to execute, that's where we actually go and make HTTP calls out to the running application locally. And so then it gets a response back, and it can parse the response to make sure that it was successful and so on. But one of the things that we kept running into is that as you have new libraries that you want to test, whether it's a new database or different versions of the same database, we had to keep creating new test applications. And there was just a lot of boilerplate code that kept getting added to the repository and kept having to be maintained. And whenever we wanted to test a new version of .NET, it just became a pain to have to upgrade those every time. So that's where we came up with the idea of using just a plain simple console app to be our primary test application. And then we have different test libraries that are going to be more focused to just contain the things that we want to test. And so this API calls test is one of those. And so the way we're handling that is we've got this, we call it the console multifunction test application. And we can queue up a series of commands, and these commands get sent to the test application via standard input. So they're just strings, and the test application can parse those strings to determine, okay, what test library do I need to load, and what method and class in the test library should I execute to handle this command. And so this is an example of one of those test libraries. So in the command, we simply say that, okay, we want to run the API calls dot trace metadata action. And so via reflection, we'll load the assembly and execute this method. So then in this method, we define the things that the logic that we want executed in the test application. In this case, since this is an API test, we're simply calling an API method that we want to be executed. And any results can be communicated back to the test runner via standard output. So we have the ability to parse that.
Just to double check, Chris, you mean that this method is called via reflection, right?
Correct.
Okay. But these are normal methods here.
These are just normal methods. And so let me, here we go. So we have this multifunction application helpers
Could you
project.
just show dependencies of this project?
Sorry, what?
Could you just open the tree for dependencies? Just want to check if all the dependencies are here. Below you have these dependencies. Or you can
Yeah. So right
Yes.
now there's just a single project file that has many of these test libraries in it. But the vision was that we could build multiple assemblies individually that we could load at runtime. But we just hadn't gotten to that need yet, and it looks like that need might not be present yet. But anyways, that was the idea. And so we have two versions of this application. We've got the .NET Core version of the application and a .NET Framework version of the application. I think we initially tried using a multi-targeting approach, but then found that things were simpler to just split them up as two separate projects. But,
so just to kind of rephrase to see if I really capture the things covered. So basically you have one application for core and framework that kind of handles the boilerplate stuff. Let's say
yes,
it's gonna write the same information to stand output or some log or something like this, all handled on the app. And then you build, right now is one assembly, but in principle could be many separate assemblies.
correct.
You build the exact steps, actions, I think the term was that you use, that you wanna test.
Correct. Yeah, and so here, so the .NET Core and the .NET Framework applications themselves, really simple. It's delegating its logic into this multifunction application, which is a shared library that they can both use. And if we go in here, this is where we have a lot of that shared logic. And so the side benefit of this is it made it really easy for us to be able to just, oh, if you got a problem with an integration test, okay, you can just go to the command line or even Visual Studio and just run the application directly and get a debugger attached and just send the commands via the command prompt the same way that ultimately the test runner was going to be doing it anyways.
One question, this is kind of tangential, but I think I understood that you mentioned that, okay, the application is running you run a test, you run a set of commands, for instance, and then you keep the application running and you run another set of tests. But this is for kind of the same instrumentation that you're targeting, or you are doing that as a general thing?
Yeah, so this is just in general how the test works. So if I'm remembering correctly, what happens is, so the constructor runs, it's going to start up the process. It's going to execute the actions that were specified. So the setup steps, as well as any commands that you want to give to the running application. So it's going to run the application. And by the time you leave the constructor here, that process is typically done running. And the state has been saved in memory. And so when the facts run, so the individual things that you want to validate, it's then looking at things in memory. So in this case, one of the things that we look at is with these tests is it relies on parsing the log files that were generated. So these log files are basically set to a verbose mode where we can actually see the payloads that we're ultimately sending up. And so it can read those in, parse them, and then you can run tests against those payloads to verify that we're sending up the right data that we expect to find. And so most of these test fixtures have a single fact. Some of the test fixtures have multiple facts in them. But that's the general idea of how it works.
Just because I think so where you have the facts, you are going to typically have on the setup, when you are building the test, you are going to start the app for that set of facts. And then you stop.
Close
And
as well.
Sorry, what was that, Robert? I couldn't hear it.
So for each test class, it will be started and closed before the tests are actually run. So the tests are just validating the logs if the traces are like emitted.
Correct. Correct.
yeah, so I think it is a similar model to Datadog, with the main difference that you pick up the common code of these apps that are the start and this kind of thing, and you have a single app for that.
Right.
One thing that I'm considering here, but this is kind of is secondary. I think is not, is that in principle you could kind of depend on how you organize your theory or facts in the test, but you could run the application less times, in not so much about the model, but the way that you organize the test. I think right now, and Zach can correct me if I'm wrong, I think if you have kind of not configuration, because configuration you really need to run again. There is no escape, right? If you change an environment variable that is a configuration, you have to, unless you have access directly to the types, you have to run again the application. But what I'm thinking is that perhaps this kind of makes a bit easier to have less runs of the test application. Let's say if you have not a configuration in that case, because of the reason that I explained, but something that you want to run different, you can use the same run of the application. I think it's just, it's a bit more invite that people implement in that way, not that the way that Upstream has prevents that, but it's a bit more kind of, I think it guides you to do that way.
Yeah, so it can be used to help minimize the number of runs of the test application, but I wouldn't necessarily say that that was the goal from the get-go.
To be honest, I would not run it once per, I don't know, 2 use cases. Because then even making assertions, you can easily get mistake. For example, having a true because the other is working fine. The first is, you know what I'm telling about or not really? That's one problem. Second problem, one use case can crash the app and the second will not work at all. And I don't think that running the app is really costly. I think the most expensive was building, copying these applications, changing the frameworks on all of them, even debugging, finding the correct application, etc.
Yeah, copying the files around and building the files have been the pain points. Running them multiple times has not. And for enhanced parallelism, each test class itself results in a copy of the profiler code and not code, but profiler bits and the test application bits.
Yeah, I think AppStream also reduced the copies that they were doing. They now share the profiler, so that helps a lot with the build time. Yeah, I like this model too. I think the fact that you have kind of you avoid the boilerplate about logging and this kind of stuff makes consistent, you know. That's, I think it's, for me, it's the big advantage.
Yeah, to me, the most interesting bit is not so much the way the tests themselves are run, but rather how the test apps are structured. And that's where it just removes a lot of the boilerplate. And when you're adding something new, that new thing that you're adding is really focused on the scenario that you're trying to test, and it removes a lot of the cruft.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. You are instrumental, I don't know, RabbitMQ, and then when you write your test, you are just writing RabbitMQ.
Yeah, so
you don't need.
I think I've got a RabbitMQ example here where, yeah, here's the test. So we just happen to have one file with all of the RabbitMQ actions that can be executed. And in theory, that could have been put in its own assembly, but it was just put in the shared one for now.
Yeah, you just need to break that assembly whenever you think you got to the point. And even that you can break in bigger groups, right? You can have whatever organization. Oh, I want to separate all HTTP stuff. I want all the Messenger, Kafka, RabbitMQ here.
Right.
I like it.
And then Paulo, I think you had previously mentioned that this is similar to the model that was done in the SDK repo. Or was that Robert?
I think it was Robert that mentioned that.
Just they did it via CLI arcs. I don't know, you said that here it's by standard input, right?
Right. And
any reasons?
It's because it's crossing process boundaries. So you got the test runner process, and then you've got the test app process. And they're two different things. And so that's why it's just using standard input, so that for simplicity there, that way you can still run the test application independent of using a test runner or not. So you can still run it from the command line for ease of debugging.
Yeah, for us that we use the profiler, I think that's essential. You know, we need to have the application at hand to run and debug with the native parts without the testing being run. I find that
I
very
think
useful.
that I think the CLI arcs will is also work, but it's just you would need to configure the debugging configuration style, right, Chris? This is why you did it by standard input. So you just paste it in the console, the name what you want to test, instead of changing the debugging configuration, right?
Right.
So just for ease of use.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah, I do expect that you do have to do some setting there, but anyway, you are able to launch the app and debug the app directly.
Yeah, especially if you already have environment variables set locally for local debugging anyways, then it's just a matter of potentially setting one environment variable that says, please debug this process, or please profile this process.
Yeah, the way that Upstream did is also very convenient if you have Visual Studio, because the launch settings JSON already has, and you just, if you launch for Visual Studio, if you launch for the command line, then you need the environment variables.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the launch settings, it's interesting because I've been having to switch back and forth between Mac and Windows. And so the launch settings work for one, but not the other.
Yeah. I also have that. I always thought, I don't know where I got that idea. I always thought that worked with the command line tools. And then I realized, no, it's just Visual Studio and kind of, but yeah, it's very convenient with Visual Studio, you know, makes very easy. So
Any other questions?
I'd like, thank you for presenting that. I think it's a slightly difference, but I think the nice thing is about being the point that you call attention. You're being focused on the exact instrumentation that you are working, and you can kind of, hey, I already have the application that gets the login, the starting, the command line. That's the nice part, you know. So you save that boilerplate. I like the idea. I think as we get to the point of starting to write and improve the unit tests, we should look at the model and perhaps make a kind of come to a consensus between us here to some structure and go for it. All right, the awkward silence moment. I don't have anything else to bring up. Does anyone else have?
Yeah, about the ASP.NET Framework integration tests that are running inside Docker. So still stuck, and there is a way to build VM that is similar to the GitHub Actions, but it's only supported at the moment for the Azure. So I'm trying to understand if it's possible to build a VM for local Hyper-V or something.
But Rasmus, you know that we can access Azure, right? Or you just do not want to?
Yeah, I know, but then it's still an additional layer, so you need to set up remote debugging and so on.
Or we'll install everything there.
Yeah, maybe might work, but
It
Yeah, I
needs,
understand.
it basically you need to debug the Azure pipeline machine. That's what you need to debug.
yeah,
GitHub Action.
to understand what it's doing differently, why tracer is not attaching.
I see.
By the way, have you checked the log files? Have you managed to check? those?
Because the tracer is not attaching, then it's not creating any.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
But the profiler should be generating some logs anyway, right? So
Yeah, it should. It's actually doing this locally. So locally everything works. So it's generating logs, and the Docker has also mapped the drive to.
So it looks like the tracer is not attached at all. The profiler, right? There's no
Yeah,
logs at
exactly.
all.
Yeah, yeah.
So you'll need to do the same exercise which I probably done, right? Probably check out what's the error when attaching the profiler. Oh, holy crap.
Yeah, and this is inside the GitHub Actions, which is also nested with the Docker container.
but these CI things usually have a way to connect to the boxes that are running the stuff.
I think that GitHub Actions doesn't have anything like that. I was searching for such things. CQCI, for example, has, right? But GitHub Actions, no.
No.
Right, Rasmus?
I saw that they have some extensions that enable the SSH, and over there you can, or if the step, let's call it step extension, is not working, then you can manually institute the SSH session there.
So yeah,
But this is complicated.
yeah, but unfortunately, this is the only way, right? Otherwise, you don't have a repo. It seems to be the only way. But it seems a kind of big step to kind of invest and check that. But as far as I understand, is the only way, because otherwise you're not going to be able to see what's happening.
Yeah, support actually replied to me that I should be able to remove the Azure code there and then just use Packer. What they're using is to build the image directly instead of PowerShell module that depends on the Azure CLI. But then I need to understand how they're generating the images, and this is another complicated thing.
One thing that's worth checking, you might have already done this, is to just make sure that the bitness of the app pool and the profiler match. So maybe adding some more, adding to the web page or something that you hit. Actually, no, you already, let's see. Actually, you're already including the process architecture in there. Never mind.
Yeah.
Looking at the action right now, the latest output. So maybe you've already done that.
Yeah, I think you have to double check those anyway. So all right, I was gonna say good luck, Erasmus, because this seems a little bit convoluted to kind of figure out, but yeah. All right then. If we are quiet, I think then it's time for us to end the meeting. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.